Well, you might be aware that certain things like quality tone woods, craftsmanship, and just an overall certain magic that vintage guitars have beyond just the age themselves and the certain stories that they have to tell. The vintage guitar market is a somewhat volatile and strange one. And when you look at the prices of things in general and the way the things of the world are going, the guitar market in particular is a very interesting subject. So today, whenever I get a good idea, I write it out in a text to myself. And today I texted out 5 guitars that I think would be a fantastic investment. And why? I'm going to save the best one for the end because I don't want anyone to... I'm thinking perhaps pondering trading towards one of these. What I'm going to mention at the end, number 5, but otherwise they're in no particular order. But I'm going to mention that at the end because I know people don't watch to the end. So I don't want anyone to find out about that and go out and get the particular one I have my eye on. So the first one is the only one in the whole list that's really not what I would call a true vintage. It's a 1990s. All the other ones are actually significantly older. So the first one is the Gibson Gospel guitar. These pop up here and there. They're unique, they're kind of low-key instruments, and I think there's only but so many floating around. With a good setup and the right set of strings, it's just a really solid square shoulder dreadnought to have that people are going to ask, say, what's that, the Gibson Gospel? Because I'm speaking about a price range that's kind of reasonable. Those are somewhat reasonable. You're not going to go into the tens of thousands, the over 5,000, or with the Gospel generally you won't even go over 2,000. It's a really good, solid guitar that's just aesthetically straightforward. It's no frills, but at the same time it's got that unique spin of the Gospel. And when they pop up, they disappear pretty quick. So keep your eye for that one. Keep your eye out on that one. That's number 1. Number 2 is the Gibson LG2 3/4. These are guitars that generally took a beating. They came with a chipboard case, which is usually tells the story in and of itself. And so when you find one in decent condition, it's surprising. There's a few of them floating around as well, and those pop up. You can find some in a cherry sunburst that came a little later, or a dark sunburst. Those were what came first. And they're fantastic for fingerstyle. They're very round and woody. And for a small guitar, it's not a super strummer by any means. But when you get into that finger picking in the key of E, it's can't be beaten. Truly can't be beaten. It has a really vibey, stoic feel to it. Mine does. I happen to have 2 of them. So that's number 2. The first one's a Gibson Gospel, and from the early 90s, and 2 is a 1950s Gibson LG2 3/4. Size would be a great investment. So what would be number 3? Number 3 would be a mid-1960s Gibson J50. Those guitars are so special, and it's the most standout one in my whole collection. The 1960s J50. Now when you go back in time, they get more costly. When you go more towards the past, the prices go up. But I fell into a little nice area with the purchase of my Gibson J50 where It was a great value on reverb from my local store. Great value when those little jewels appear. And the guy said this guitar is not going to last for more than a week here. And it was for about 2000, and that's the Gibson J50. Whereas if you go and you get yourself a 1950s, those can be 7,000. So that's truly was a great value. The tone is very strong, metallic. It's a very warm, powerful strummer. It's an incredible instrument. It's not anything that can be recreated. And like the last one, the LG 2 3/4, they haven't even tried to. I mean, there's the Arlo one. You could say that's a recreation, but even that is not a current production model. You know, when those Arlo models pop up of the LG 2 3/4, those sell fast. So we have the Gibson Gospel, the LG 2 3/4, and a 1960s Gibson J50. What's number 4? It's number 4. Well, I'll think of that after. Let's sneak in the last one that I said was going to be the last one because it's no particular order. So this next one, number 4, is a 1964 Epiphone Texan. The same guitar as Paul McCartney played. Because I played one recently, and I recommend you invest in a 1964 Epiphone Texan guitar, because I played one and it was perfect. It had every repair imaginable. It had so many cracks that the cracks were growing roots out of it. It had a giant belly on it. The headstock had snapped off and been repaired. The bridge had been replaced. The frets had been redone. The neck felt so worn in that it had scales on it. And it was one of the best guitars I ever played. It had a pickup system added to it. It literally had everything done known to man to it. And it was incredible. And that'll never be recreated. In your lifetime or my lifetime, we'll never see a guitar like that again. So I have 2 of the LG 2 3/4, and I'm pondering trading one of them for that Texan. That's my only option, but at least I went and got to play it. And it was not as bassy as the J50. But it had a neck profile, even though the neck was broken off and felt very worn in. It had a neck that I liked even better than the J50, profile-wise. But the J50 has a more aggressive tone to it. And maybe strings played a role, I don't know, but the Texan was not nearly as bassy as my J50. So we have the Gibson Gospel, the LG 2 3/4, the 1960s J50, and an Epiphone Texan. What's number 5? So I'm forgetting now. What is number 5? Because I had 5 of them. Let me think through my instruments here. Let me think a minute, guys. Take a pause for the cause. Let's see, Martin, Gibson. I remember now. Because it's not a guitar. Favilla ukuleles. I recommend you invest in a Favilla ukulele. Because I've recently discovered this company. And I believe that people are catching on to these instruments for the value that they hold, as being a poor man's Martin ukulele. And there's some floating around on Reverb now. I'm just starting out on that instrument. So just picked it up, smell it. It smells perfect. Yeah, it's a certain feeling.